My writing has for years been concerned with the effects of things, not their impact, but their consequences.
The medium is the message. The now infamous, though often misunderstood, phrase from media theorist Marshall McLuhan is one that remains prevalent within our now media ubiquitous landscape of hypermedia, social software, and digital worlds. This concept derives from the notion that media becomes an extension of human bodies, according to McLuhan, and therefore there exists a visceral and ambient relationship between media and bodies. Video games, perhaps more deeply than other media preceding it, serve as an embodied illustration of this McLuhanian concept due to the physical and intellectual participation the player must partake in to experience the medium. Video games directly invoke and invite the control of players both literally via game mechanics and figuratively via player expression and agency. Jesper Juul refers to this as the aesthetics of video games, or Aesthetics 2. Within Aesthetics 2, games are designed for goal-oriented behavior in which players evaluate the game's objects for their utility. In other words, games of this nature focus on player optimization, strategizing, and development for its own sake. This builds upon the aesthetics of video games, or Aesthetics 1, where players engage in gameplay without optimization for the sake of play itself. The significance of Aesthetics 2 within video games resides in the player's expression via optimization and utility seeking. With player expression, games sometimes allow their players to do unexpected things, often just because these actions are not explicitly forbidden. This notion of play is identified by game scholar Aarseth as transgressive play. According to Aarseth, moments of transgressive play are such because they are not part of the game's intended repertoire, and would in most cases have been rendered impossible if the game designers could have predicted them. Because transgressive play occurs when the player transcends beyond what the game developers envisioned, gameplay emerging from transgressive play can be considered as a type of player expression since it was not controlled or decided by the developers, as well as its potential for optimization within Aesthetics 2. Player expression in Aesthetics 2 and transgressive play, as they both consider player agency challenging that of developer control, also network with Henry Jenkins's participatory culture, because players' voices and identities are elevated within the fandom of the game. Within a participatory culture, individuals are often gathered together as a community due to shared interest networks, like video games, in which members believe that their contributions matter, and there is some type of informal membership whereby what is known by the most experienced is passed along to novices. With transgressive play as a form of player expression in mind, participatory play is important for members of video game communities because it allows for producing new creative forms and shaping the flow of new media within the game world. One game that models transgressive play as participatory play is the Tekken franchise, particularly from its third iteration onwards, because of the innovative gameplay constantly being refined within the fandom community. The Korean Backdash, or KBD, a strategic move discovered and perfected by the community in the South Korean Tekken scene, confirms Aarseth's concept of transgressive play as a form of player expression emerging within Juul's Aesthetics 2. Within this phenomenon of transgressive play and player expression in the KBD, Tekken players also partake in Jenkins's participatory culture, wherein the Tekken community in South Korea collaborates through an interest-driven network and makes significant contributions to the fandom, thus shaping the game as much as the game shapes their community. Player expression within Tekken is illustrated through utility seeking and optimization of the game mechanics intended by the game developers. Within the Tekken franchise, it is important for a player to manage their spacing because it is a 3D fighting game where jockeying for position is crucial for gaining an advantage in the match. As part of this, one vital utility players seek is retreat through moving backwards. The fastest way a player can retreat is by inputting back twice in quick succession, which is called a backdash. However, backdashing is deliberately limited by the game developers. After completing one backdash, there is an intentional animation frame which prevents players from performing successive backdashes. While successive backdashes are not part of Tekken's intended repertoire, players can interrupt the backdash animation with nearly any other command, such as crouching. In this way, players can perform what's known as backdash canceling, to retreat faster than regular backdashes alone. As Juul notes of optimization within Aesthetics 2, play is not entirely free, but free movement within a more rigid structure of rules and limitations. Tekken does not allow its players to move freely without limitations, but players can identify ways to freely move within the limited mechanics and controls of the game. In Tekken, transgressive play emerges with the KBD, which competitive Tekken players in South Korea discovered through attempts to optimize backdash canceling. In doing so, players discovered a glitch within the controls of an arcade stick. When letting the stick go from a down-back position, another back input would be registered. If players release the stick so that the down input is released first, the back input will activate for a second before the lever goes back to a neutral position. This split-second activation of the back switch inside the arcade stick gives players a free back input just for releasing the lever. If players input back one more time after the controller glitch back input, then the character performs a backdash. Repeating this pattern multiple times results in what is called the KBD. The discovery of this glitch serves as an embodiment of McLuhan's notion that media is an extension of human beings. Our human senses, of which all media are extensions, are also fixed charges on our personal energies and configure the awareness and experiences of each one of us. In the case of the KBD, the transgressive play is not only exceeding the game's intended moveset, but additionally embodies a tactile extension of the player's self into the game's media. Within Jenkinson's participatory culture, the KBD in Tekken illustrates the four processes of participation in contemporary culture: affiliations, expressions, collaborative problem-solving, and circulations. The KBD represents affiliations within participatory culture because the Tekken scene in South Korea consists of formal and informal memberships, competitive and casual players centered around various forms of media, the Tekken franchise. The KBD models expressions due to Tekken players producing new creative forms within the game via optimization and transgressive play. Collaborative problem-solving is depicted through the KBD because South Korean competitive players saw optimization of backdash canceling collectively and collaboratively in order to develop new knowledge. Finally, circulations of the KBD within the global Tekken community shape the way the game is presently played in its newest iterations, with the technique still bearing Korean in its name, recalling the micro-community of Tekken players who first transgressed the intended repertoire of Tekken gameplay. The KBD clarifies the McLuhanian concept of media acting as an extension of human bodies due to the tactile apprehension players exhibit in transgressing the limitations of Tekken planned by the developers. The impact the KBD has had within the Tekken franchise elevates the player's transgressive play to that of a participatory play, where the transgression will continue to inform and influence the way future Tekken players partake in innovative and collaborative gameplay moving forward.